My name is James Carter. I am 65 years old, and for 38 years I measured my life in early mornings, long shifts, difficult decisions, and responsibilities that never seemed to end. I lived in a quiet suburb outside Indianapolis, Indiana, the kind of place where people waved to their neighbors, where the streets became empty after sunset, and where everyone knew who had spent their life building something and who had simply watched from the sidelines. I was never a man who needed attention. I never wanted my name on a wall. I never wanted people standing around telling me how great I was. I believed a person's actions spoke louder than anything they could say. You showed up. You worked hard. You protected the people who depended on you. That was enough. At least that was what I told myself. For decades, I carried that belief like a badge of honor. I was an operations manager at a manufacturing company that had become almost like a second home. I started there when I was young, when my hair was still dark and my hands still looked like they belonged to someone who had never known exhaustion. Over the years, I watched people come and go. Young employees arrived full of ambition. Older employees retired and disappeared into quieter lives. Companies changed. Technology changed. The world changed. But I stayed. 38 years. A lifetime. I gave that company my best years because I believed loyalty mattered. And I carried that same belief into my family, especially with my son, Michael. When Michael was born, I remember holding him for the first time and feeling something I had never felt before. A responsibility so powerful it almost scared me. I knew from that moment that my life was no longer only mine. Everything I did would affect him. Every choice. Every sacrifice, every hour I spent away from home, it all mattered. So I built my life around making sure he had more opportunities than I did. I wanted him to start higher than where I started. I wanted him to avoid the struggles that had shaped me. When Michael needed help with college, I didn't hesitate. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, looking at the numbers in front of me. Tuition costs, books, housing. Expenses that seemed to multiply every year. My wife at the time asked me if we could afford it. I remember looking at those papers and saying, "We'll figure it out." That became the sentence of my life. We'll figure it out. When Michael needed something, I figured it out. When he wanted to pursue a career opportunity in another city, I helped him get there. When he struggled financially after graduation, I stepped in. When he wanted to buy his first house, I gave him money for the down payment. I didn't do those things because I expected something in return. A father isn't supposed to keep a list. A father doesn't hand his child an invoice for love. I gave because I loved him. That was the truth. But somewhere along the way something changed. The things I gave became things people expected. The sacrifices I made became invisible. And I didn't notice it happening. That was the hardest part. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't a single moment where someone looked me in the eyes and said they didn't care. It happened slowly. A missed phone call here. A forgotten promise there. A conversation cut short because someone was too busy. Small things, almost meaningless by themselves. But small things become heavy when they happen for years. Michael became an adult. He built his own life. He married Lauren. And I was happy for him. I truly was. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted him to have the things I had spent my life working toward. A stable home, a loving relationship, a comfortable future. But as his life became fuller, mine became quieter. I started noticing that I was always the one reaching out. I was the one calling, the one checking in, the one asking how things were going. Michael was never completely absent. That would have been easier to understand. He was simply always somewhere else. There was always something happening. Project at work. A weekend plan. A trip. A responsibility. And I accepted every excuse because I loved him. I told myself that adults became busy. I told myself that this was normal. I told myself that one day he would slow down and realize how much time had passed. I kept waiting for that day. Then came my retirement. My final day. The day I thought would mean something. I had never been someone who celebrated himself. I avoided birthdays where people made too much of a fuss. I never liked being the center of attention. But retirement was different. 38 years only happens once. I wanted my son there. Not for the company. Not for the executives. Not for the ceremony. For me. I wanted one memory where I could look back and say, my son was there when one chapter of my life ended. A week before the ceremony, I called Michael. I still remember exactly where I was standing. The kitchen. My coffee sitting untouched on the counter. Morning light coming through the window. A completely ordinary moment. That is what makes it strange. Some of the moments that hurt us most begin in ordinary places. Michael, I said, I wanted to make sure you're still coming Friday. There was a pause. Not a long pause, but long enough. Long enough for me to understand that he wasn't excited. Dad. That one word already sounded different. I don't think we can make it. I felt my hand tighten around the phone. What happened? He sighed. Lauren and I were thinking about going to Las Vegas. We've been talking about it for a while. I waited. I waited for the part where he said they would change their plans. I waited for him to say the trip could happen another time. I waited for him to say that his father's retirement happened once. But instead, he said, it's just a small event, Dad. A small event. Those words stayed with me. Because he wasn't talking about a ceremony. He was talking about me. 38 years. A lifetime of work. A lifetime of trying to give him a better future. And somehow, my final day of that journey was just a small event. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him about the money I spent or the things I sacrificed. Because love loses something when you have to beg someone to recognize it. So I swallowed the pain and said the only thing I could say. I understand. But I didn't. Not really. I went to the ceremony alone. I wore my suit. I drove the same roads I had driven thousands of times. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was driving away from something instead of toward it. When I walked into that building, I saw familiar faces. People I had worked beside for decades. People who knew my dedication. People who knew the nights I stayed late. The problems I solved. The pressure I carried. They shook my hand. They thanked me. They told me they appreciated everything I had done. And I smiled. I thanked them. But inside, there was a quiet emptiness. Because the one person I wanted to see wasn't there. My son. The company leadership surprised me that afternoon. I thought it would be a simple retirement gathering. A few speeches. A handshake. Maybe a plaque. I was wrong. They had prepared something much bigger. They spoke about my years of service. They spoke about the people I had helped. They spoke about the impact I had made. Then they announced something I never expected. A special retirement bonus. $500,000. The room erupted in applause. People stood. People cheered. But I stood there silently, because all I could think about was how strange life could be. The people I worked with for 38 years saw my value. The people I loved most had stopped noticing it. That evening, I drove home with a check representing decades of dedication sitting beside me. A number that could change my life. A number that could buy comfort. A number that could finally allow me to put myself first. But as I sat alone in my house that night, staring at the quiet rooms I had spent years building a life inside, I realized something. Money was never what I wanted. I wanted to matter. And somewhere along the way, I had allowed myself to become something people only noticed when they needed something. That was the first crack. I just didn't know yet how wide it would become. I thought retirement would feel different. For 38 years, I imagined the moment when I would finally wake up without an alarm, drink my coffee slowly, and decide what I wanted to do with my own time. I imagined peace. I imagined freedom. I imagined finally putting myself first after a lifetime of putting everyone else ahead of me. But the morning after my retirement ceremony, I woke up with a strange feeling. Not happiness. Not relief. Something heavier. Silence. The kind of silence that forces you to hear thoughts you have spent years avoiding. My phone sat on the kitchen counter. I looked at it more times than I want to admit. I told myself I wasn't waiting. I told myself I didn't need a call from Michael. But I was waiting for my son to ask how the ceremony went. I was waiting for him to say he was sorry he missed it. I was waiting for him to acknowledge that maybe his father's final day after nearly 4 decades of work deserved more than a few casual words. The phone never rang. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. Not that evening. I kept making excuses for him. He was traveling. He was busy. He probably felt guilty and didn't know what to say. That was what fathers do. We protect our children even when they hurt us. We find reasons for them. We soften their mistakes. We carry their weight. I had spent my entire life doing exactly that. But something inside me had changed. The ceremony had opened my eyes. For the first time, I looked honestly at my relationship with Michael. Not as his father. Not through the lens of unconditional love. But as a man asking himself a painful question. When did I become someone whose presence was optional? The answer was uncomfortable. I had allowed it. I had trained everyone around me to believe I would always be there. No matter what. No matter how little they gave back. No matter how many times I was disappointed. I was the reliable one. The emergency contact. The solution. The person who could always be counted on. But people sometimes stop appreciating what they believe they can never lose. And I had made myself impossible to lose. At least that was what I thought. A few days passed. Then a week. Michael eventually called. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was angry. Because I was tired. There is a difference. Anger burns hot. Tiredness is colder. Anger wants confrontation. Tiredness simply wants the pain to stop. "Hey, Dad," he said when I picked up. His voice sounded normal. Too normal. "How's retirement?" I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the empty chair across from me. The chair where I had imagined him sitting after the ceremony. "It's fine," I said. "Good. You deserve it." I waited. Again. Always waiting. Waiting for the words that never came. "I'm sorry I missed the ceremony." But they didn't come. Instead, he started talking about his trip. Las Vegas. The restaurants. The hotel. The places they visited. I listened quietly, and something inside me cracked a little further. Because he wasn't a son who missed an important moment and felt terrible. He was a man who had moved past it. A man who had decided it wasn't important enough to carry. That night, after we hung up, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. I thought about every moment I had sacrificed for him. The college payments. The weekends spent helping him move. The money I gave when he was struggling. The advice he ignored and later returned asking for. The times I canceled my own plans because he needed something. I remembered all of it. Not because I wanted credit. Because I wanted to understand. Had I spent my entire life confusing being needed with being loved? That question stayed with me. Then came the moment that finally forced me to stop ignoring the truth. My nephew Ryan called me. Ryan was my sister's son. A young man with ambition, but not many resources. He had been working for years on an idea for a small technology company. Nothing glamorous. Nothing guaranteed. Just a dream. The kind of dream most people abandon because reality becomes too heavy. He called me one evening and asked if I would meet him for coffee. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe outside Indianapolis. He looked nervous. "Uncle James," he said. "I know this is a lot to ask." I smiled. "Then ask." He explained his business idea. He explained the challenges, the equipment, the development costs, the risks. I listened, and as he spoke, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hunger, determination, gratitude. He wasn't assuming I would help him. He wasn't acting entitled. He was asking. There was a difference. A big difference. I thought about the $500,000 sitting untouched in my account. The money everyone would expect me to spend on myself. The money Michael might assume would eventually help him. And I realized something. For decades, I had been giving to people who already believed they deserved what I provided. Ryan was different. He understood the value of an opportunity. So I made my decision. I invested the money into his company. Every dollar. Not because he was my favorite. Not because I wanted to punish Michael. because I wanted my sacrifice to build something where it would be respected. When Ryan received the news, he was speechless. He looked at me and said, "I don't even know how to thank you." And that sentence hit me harder than he probably understood. Because after years of giving, those were words I had forgotten existed. I told him, "Don't thank me. Make something good with it." He promised he would. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like my generosity meant something. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the decision would stay between Ryan and me. I was wrong. A few weeks later, Ryan posted about the company online. He thanked me publicly. He talked about how one person believing in him changed his future. I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't want attention. But the post spread. Friends saw it. Family members saw it. And eventually, Michael saw it. That was the moment everything changed. Because for the first time, my son discovered something he had never bothered to ask. His father had received a life-changing retirement bonus. And instead of using it for himself, instead of saving it for Michael, instead of making his son's life easier again, I had chosen someone else. The messages started that same evening. "Dad." Then another. "Can we talk?" Then another. "I just saw something online." I looked at the screen. His name appeared again and again. I didn't respond. The phone kept lighting up. Calls, messages, missed calls. I watched them come in. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed to understand something. Why did my value become visible only after my money became visible? That was the question I couldn't escape. For years, Michael had known exactly who I was. A father, provider, a person who would move mountains for him. But somehow, the moment he realized there was something valuable he had not received, suddenly I mattered again. I placed the phone face down on the table. The notifications continued, but I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence is the only way a person can finally hear the truth. And I had spent 38 years speaking. Now, for once, I wanted to see if anyone would notice when I stopped. The calls continued. At first, they came slowly. One message in the morning. One call in the afternoon. A simple question. "Dad, can we talk?" Then they became more frequent. 5 calls. 10 calls. 20. I watched my phone light up again and again while I sat in the quiet house I had spent years maintaining. The strange thing was, I wasn't angry. People expect anger when someone feels betrayed. They imagine shouting, accusations, a dramatic confrontation where everything finally comes out. But that wasn't what I felt. I felt tired, deeply tired. The kind of tired that comes after carrying something heavy for too long and finally putting it down. For years, I had been trying to prove my place in my own family. I never said that out loud. I never admitted it. Because a father isn't supposed to need reassurance from his child. A father gives. A father protects. A father accepts. But somewhere along the way, I forgot something important. I was still a person. I still had feelings. I still wanted to know that I mattered. And when Michael skipped my retirement ceremony, something inside me finally admitted what I had spent years denying. I had become convenient, not cherished, not valued, convenient. When he needed help, I was his father. When he needed advice, I was his father. When he needed money, I was his father. But when I needed him for one important day, I was just an event on a calendar. Something optional. That realization hurt more than the missed ceremony itself. The ceremony was one day. The feeling behind it represented years. I had spent decades building a relationship with someone who had slowly stopped seeing the effort behind it. And now he only saw me clearly because someone else had received what he thought should have been his. That was the part one couldn't ignore. Not the money. The reason. If Michael had called me because he missed me, I would have answered immediately. If he had called because he realized he had hurt me, I would have listened. But his first reaction wasn't about my feelings. It was about the money. The money made him look closer. The money made him ask questions. The money made me important again. And that broke something inside me. After several days of ignoring his calls, I finally answered one. It was the 48th call. I remember because I counted them, not out of spite, because sometimes you need to understand how long someone will keep knocking after years of walking away. I pressed the button. Hello? There was silence. Then I heard his voice. Dad. Different this time. Not casual. Not distracted. Heavy. I've been trying to reach you. I know. Another silence. Why haven't you answered? I looked around my living room. The same room where I had sat alone after my retirement. The same room where I had realized how empty my life had become. I needed time. Time for what? I closed my eyes. To understand why you suddenly care. His breathing changed. I could tell my words landed. Dad, that's not fair. I almost smiled. Fair. That was an interesting word. Isn't it? Of course I care about you. I leaned back in my chair. Michael, your first call wasn't to ask how retirement was going. He didn't respond. Your first message wasn't to apologize for missing the ceremony. Silence. You saw a post online. Dad. No. Let me finish. My voice stayed calm. That surprised even me. For years, I had imagined this conversation. I imagined anger. I imagined finally telling him everything I had kept buried. But when the moment came, I didn't need anger. The truth was enough. The problem was never that you missed one afternoon. Michael said nothing. The problem was that you didn't understand what that afternoon represented. I stared at the floor. I spent my entire life making sure you had opportunities. I helped you when you were struggling. I supported you when you needed someone. I never kept score. I know that. Do you? My question hung between us. I don't think you do. His voice softened. I was busy, Dad. There it was. The explanation. The word people use when they want to describe why something important became less important. Busy. I know you were busy. Then why are you acting like I don't love you? I swallowed. Because that was the hardest part. I didn't believe Michael hated me. That would have been easier. Hate is clear. Indifference is confusing. I don't think you don't love me. Then what? I think you forgot me. The line went quiet. I think you became so comfortable knowing I would always be there that you stopped realizing I was there. I heard him breathe. I made mistakes. Yes. I should have come. Yes. I'm sorry. Those words mattered. They did. I won't pretend they didn't. But apologies don't erase years. They only open the door to change. And I didn't know yet if Michael wanted to walk through that door, or if he only wanted to escape the consequences. I'm glad you're sorry, I said. Then why won't you let me fix it? I looked at the ceiling. Because I had spent years fixing everything for everyone else. Because fixing something isn't the same as understanding it. He didn't answer. I continued. I don't want you to look at me differently because of what I have. I want you to look at me differently because of who I am. That was the truth. The only truth that mattered. A few days later, Michael and Lauren came to my house. I knew they were coming. He had called and asked. This time I answered. This time I let him come. But I didn't prepare anything. I didn't cook a big meal. I didn't clean every corner of the house like I used to before visits. I didn't try to make everything comfortable. For once, I let the moment be what it was. When the door opened, Michael looked older. Not physically, emotionally, like he had finally started carrying something I had carried for years. He stood there quietly. Dad. I nodded. Come in. Lauren followed behind him. She looked uncomfortable. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she finally saw the distance that had grown between us. We sat in the living room. 3 people surrounded by years of things never said. Michael looked down at his hands. I was wrong. Simple words, but difficult ones. I waited. I thought because you were my dad, you would always be there. I looked at him. And you thought that meant you didn't have to show up. His eyes lowered. Yes. That answer hurt. But it was honest. And honesty was something I had been missing. I should have been there, he said. You should have. I should have appreciated everything you did. Yes. He nodded. I don't know why I didn't. That was the first real thing he had said. Not an excuse. Not a defense. Just confusion. And maybe that was where change began. Not with guilt, not with money, with understanding. I told him about the night after retirement. I told him how I sat alone, how I looked at my phone, how I realized I had spent years giving without ever asking if anyone noticed. Michael cried. Not dramatically, quietly, the way adults cry when they finally understand they cannot undo something. I'm sorry, Dad. This time I believed him. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. A broken bridge can be rebuilt. But both sides have to carry the materials. I had carried enough. Now it was his turn. After Michael and Lauren left that evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat in my house and thought about myself. Not my son. Not my responsibilities. Not who needed my help next. Me. Felt strange. Almost uncomfortable. For most of my life, I had measured my worth by what I could provide. A good father was someone who sacrificed. A good husband was someone who carried burdens quietly. A good man was someone who never complained. That was the standard I lived by. And for a long time, I was proud of it. But there is a dangerous place a person can reach when they spend their entire life giving. You start believing your only value comes from what you can do for others. You forget that you still matter when your hands are empty. That was the lesson I had to learn. The money had changed nothing about who I was. The $500,000 didn't make me more valuable. It didn't make me wiser. It didn't make me more deserving of respect. It only revealed something that had already been there. People often show you what they truly see when something changes. When I had nothing new to offer, I was easy to overlook. When I suddenly had something valuable, everyone remembered my name. That realization stayed with me, but I refused to let it turn me bitter. That would have been the easiest path. It would have been easy to decide that everyone was selfish. That love was just another transaction. That kindness was weakness. But I knew that wasn't true. The problem was never that I loved too much. The problem was that I forgot love needed boundaries. I could love my son without allowing myself to disappear. I could support my family without becoming invisible. I could forgive someone without pretending they never hurt me. Those were lessons I learned later in life. Lessons I wish I had learned earlier. Ryan's company became my focus. Watching him build something from nothing reminded me why I had helped him. Every meeting, every challenge, every small victory. He appreciated every opportunity. When things went well, he called me. When things went wrong, he called me. Not because he needed money, because he valued my advice. That difference meant more than he knew. One afternoon, months after the investment, I visited his office. It was a small place. Nothing impressive. A few desks, some computers, a whiteboard covered with ideas. But I looked around and saw something important. A beginning. I saw a young man who understood that opportunity was not something you were entitled to. It was something you honored. Ryan walked me through their progress. He explained what they had accomplished. He talked about future plans. Then he stopped and looked at me. I still don't know how I'll ever repay you. I shook my head. You don't. He frowned. I mean it. I know you do. I looked around the room. Just remember how it felt when someone believed in you. Then do the same for someone else someday. He nodded, and I knew he understood. That was what I had wanted all along. Not repayment. Not recognition. Impact. A person knowing that someone believed in them. That was what I had spent my life trying to create. The difference was that now I was choosing where that effort went. Michael continued coming around. Slowly, carefully. Not with grand gestures. Not with expensive gifts. He learned something important. Trust does not return because someone says sorry once. Trust returns through consistency. Through small choices repeated over time. He started calling just to talk. Not to ask questions. Not to request help. Just to talk. At first, those conversations felt awkward. Years of distance cannot disappear overnight. Sometimes there were long pauses. Sometimes neither of us knew what to say. But I noticed something. He stayed. That mattered. Because for years I was always the one staying. Now he was learning. One evening, We sat outside my house watching the sun disappear behind the trees. It was quiet, a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind I used to think I would only find after retirement. Michael looked at me. "Dad." I turned. "I know I can't change what happened." I said nothing. "But I want you to know something." I waited. I was wrong. Those words had been said before. But this time they felt different. Because he wasn't saying them because he needed something. He wasn't standing in front of a problem asking me to solve it. He was simply admitting the truth. "I treated your love like it was guaranteed," he said. I looked away for a moment. Because hearing someone finally understand something you waited years for can bring a strange kind of pain. It makes you happy, but it also reminds you how long you waited. "I should have been there," he continued. "Yes," I said quietly. "I should have seen you." That sentence stayed with me, because that was the wound. Not the missed ceremony, not the money, not the vacation. I wanted to be seen. I wanted my son to understand that behind every payment, every sacrifice, every late night, there was a person who loved him, a person who wanted to matter. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes again," Michael said. I nodded. "That's honest. But I can promise I won't assume you'll always be there without showing you that I appreciate it." For the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I had lost. Hope. Not the blind hope I had carried before. Not the hope that ignored reality. A wiser kind. A hope built on actions. Years have passed since that retirement day. The day I thought I was forgotten. The day I learned one of the hardest lessons of my life. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who need to be reminded that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. I still help people. I still believe in generosity. I still believe family matters. But I no longer destroy myself trying to prove my love. That chapter of my life is over. I spend more time doing things I postponed for decades. I travel. I read. I sit outside with a cup of coffee and watch the morning arrive. Small things. Simple things. Things I spent years telling myself I didn't have time for. I also continue supporting Ryan and his company. Not because I expect anything. Because I see the person he is becoming. And because helping someone grow is one of the greatest feelings in the world. As for Michael, our relationship is different now. Not perfect. Real. There are still scars. Some wounds leave marks. But maybe that is okay. A scar is proof that something was hurt and survived. I don't know if Michael will ever fully understand what those years meant to me. Maybe nobody can truly understand another person's sacrifices. Maybe that is something we all learn too late. But I know this. Love without appreciation becomes invisible. Sacrifice without respect becomes a burden. And a person can spend their whole life giving everything away before realizing they were allowed to keep something for themselves. I spent 38 years building a career, a lifetime building a family, and in the end, the hardest thing I ever built was the courage to finally value myself. So I ask you this, was I wrong to step back? Was I wrong to stop chasing someone who had forgotten to look back? Or was that the moment I finally respected myself enough to stop begging to be seen? If you had spent your whole life giving everything you had, would you have endured it? Or would you have chosen yourself too?